the troubles and the problems that bother the person is silence. And when I explain stillness, it's the brain, the thought, and the heart become into coherence. And when that coherence happens, what happens is maybe for the first time, Tiff, think about that. That person suddenly gets connected to its own soul.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to my show. My name is Tiffany Alexander, and this is Unveiling Journeys. I am so excited to have you here. Oh, my goodness. Can I just tell you a moment about me? I love people. I love people so much. And at the end of when I hang out with people, typically they're awesome. And I like to ask them at the end of this conversation, this has been so fun. How can I get to know more people just like you? Or if you're like, Tiff, I don't know these people you're meeting all the time. I always just say, wow, this has been awesome. Who do you know that I need to know? And that way it's like an open door to say, hey, think of me if you know more people. And by all means, that has turned me into what people call like super connector. And this show was developed because by golly, I cannot keep them quiet. I must echo them. I must be a megaphone to them. They're so darn cool. And I want everybody to know about them. And so one person at a time, one show at a time, and we lean forward into it, which leads me to introduce my guest. Okay, I'm so excited. My guest today, I'm going to let him tell you about himself, but I have just a quick story really quick. Marcus, the very first time that I met, which of course was from a referral, um, we had a phenomenal conversation. It like blew me away. And you said something that I still think about weekly, which now that's been, I don't even know, just shy of like a year. You said, Tiff, I unsubscribed from all of my emails. And I thought to myself, by golly, I get a coupon every now and again I want. But those newsletters I could probably stand to live without. And so every time I get a newsletter or a thing or an email, I'm like, Marcus would have unsubscribed from this. And it's just interesting to think of how much you choose that intentionality with the way that you live your life. And so this is one of the many reasons that I am excited to have you on the show. So do me a favor, Marcus, tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you're up to right now.
Thank you so much for having me, Tiff. So let me start this way. A year ago, I would have introduced myself as I'm an executive coach and I'm a business consultant and a damn good one. So as you know, 11 months ago, we arrived here in the US. Everything turned out a little bit different than we expected. And I ended up with two questions. Why am I here? And why am I here? So the first why I'm here is why I'm in the US. And the second one is why I'm here in general. Because, I somehow realized that everything I've been doing to that point was successful, kind of satisfying, but it's almost like filling somebody's bucket, knowing that there are holes in it, and the water you fill in literally seeps out. That's a consultant and coaching work usually. Not too much really lasts because, it's almost like taking care of the symptoms and not of the real cause. And this is really who I am. So I'm a reformed business consultant, a reformed executive coach who decided to start doing what I've been doing probably covertly. I said to people, let's work on your retention rate, for example. But covertly, I was working on their foundation. Because it came down to attitude, it came down to beliefs. But I couldn't go in as a rah-rah boo-boo person and say, this is what we're going to do. So it's almost like a CIA spy who says, you know what? I want a covert mission. I will never be able to really say and admit what I'm doing. So I'm doing it covertly. And now I have the privilege, Tiff, to actually do what I always believed without giving it second thought with the people I work with because they want it. So, as you know, the big thing about me is stillness. So, if I would give it a title, it would be being a steward of stillness.
Mm.
So, what I'm doing is, you know what? I meet a lot of people just like you. Probably I'm a super connector as well. So, the people I meet, it's usually like this. I meet them, and then suddenly, almost like a cloak is going over the two of us. The noise that has been present just a couple of minutes ago is silence. The troubles and the problems that bother the person is silence. And when I explain stillness, it's the brain, the thought, and the heart become into coherence. And when that coherence happens, what happens is maybe for the first time, Tiff, think about that. That person suddenly gets connected to its own soul. And I'd love to give you an example. So quite often when I'm on a call with somebody, the person suddenly says, Markus, I've never looked at it this way. And I just smirk because I haven't said a word, but I know who has that person's soul.
That's fantastic.
So you see what I'm doing is I'm a concierge helping that person to connect with that person's soul and helping that soul to land in that person. So this is a beautiful thing to do, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I can still help them as a business consultant or executive.
Yeah. And that's really fun. I know you have incredible stories. We told just like a few when we first got a chance to meet a while back.
Mhm.
And the impact that you're making on some of these people was, like you said, like reverberating into not just their business, but into their life, into their
Yeah.
soul. Maybe they're like, I've got my fifth jet now. What's next? It's like, wait a minute. Why did you even need that? Like, just the ability that you have to see you're coming in, but you're like a ninja. Without
Remember,
even
there's this one question which almost everyone asks who meets me. Marcus, is this as good as it gets? Meaning their lives, their situations, or is there more? And you know what's so interesting? I only actually figured out what the more is because, some people would say, isn't there more money? Isn't there more fame? Aren't there more, lucrative opportunities? Are there more exciting connections to make? That's all superficial outside. But I believe what everyone is looking for is actually to be connected to their own soul. Because in the soul, you find purpose. In the soul, you find meaning. So if you think about that, so everybody I meet is driven by that one question. Is this really as good as it gets? Or is there more? No, in worldly understanding, I've reached everything. As you said, some people have private jets. Some people just sold their company and sitting on one, like, sorry, half a billion with a B dollars on their bank account. Call my friend and cry, literally saying, what's next? There's nothing else to thrive for.
right?
I have $500 million on my bank account. I don't have a company anymore to take care of. My family is for generations secured financially. You as a financial advisor, you know very much what I'm talking about. So what's next? So the question, is this as good as it gets, or is there more to my life, is extremely vital. And then actually to start working with these people and say, look, you probably sense it already when we talk. Everything else outside quiets. And what I'm actually doing is I'm a guide who leads people from the outside on the journey inside, which I believe there's nothing more beautiful to do.
Mm. Wow. This is so fun. This is different than a lot of the conversations I've ever had because it's always like, what do we get? What do we get? What do we more, more, more? And you're like, wait a minute. What about just what you have in you, in yourself? And you're like, let me do this. This is Unveiling Journeys. So I want to start from the beginning. Can we rewind back and tell me where are you from and kind of where did this all start? What did you even like want to be when you were growing up or would you go to school for?
Okay, so originally I'm from Switzerland. I've been married to my beautiful wife, Holly, for 17 years. So when we got engaged, I literally snatched her and we flew to Switzerland, stayed there for the entire marriage. And now last October, we decided to come back for 3 months, which, turned out to be a bit longer. And I filed for my green card. And so that's in the process right now. Um, my dad sort of always was my role model. He was a salesperson and he was a kind of a happy person. And I always knew working with people seems to make people happy. You know, like he can ask questions which not many other people can ask without being beaten. So I decided to follow his footsteps and went into sales. Quite quickly, I realized that was, an opening. So I ended up in HR, in business development. I ended up, my last position was senior vice president in an outplacement company. So I basically had the natural career. However, what is really interesting, at the age of 9.5, I believe that's when the turning point was in my life because an accident happened. 4 people almost died. And I was accused of being, the guilty party. So only 20 years later, I learned that I wasn't really guilty, but my parents somehow missed the point to tell me throughout those 20 years. That was quite a tough thing. So, you hear me talk about soul a lot. So at 9.5, I decided to take my soul and roll it in because I knew the journey from 9.5 onward would actually put my soul into harm. So I wanted to protect it. What's probably a bit different is it is sad that most people come to this earth forgetting who they actually are. And either by the grace of the universe or by God, they sooner or later start developing a relationship with their soul. But I was born completely knowing who I was. And at the age of 9.5, decided to forget. Because when you separate yourself from your soul, when you wall it in and leave it behind, you absolutely start forgetting who you are. So now you see, if somebody never had that connection, that is the reason, Tiff, why most people actually walk through their lives as zombies.
Oh,
Yes, they're extremely busy, they're extremely successful, but look at whether they are soulful people. They're not. How can you be soul filled if you don't have a connection to yourself? And to close the circle, that's what people say when they ask, is there more? Because they sense all that thing that I've accomplished and accumulated outside. That can't be it. There's always an emptiness inside. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with that story where several gods meet and say, where can we actually hide the most precious thing? So only when that person is ready to find it is actually ready to find it. And the one of them said, let's go to the highest mountain of the earth, Mount Everest. The other one said, Reinhold Messmer, he went up there without the oxygen tank. That's probably not the best idea to hide it there. The other one said, okay, let's go to the deepest point of the sea. And the other one said, have you heard of Jacques Cousteau and his father? Okay, no good idea. Okay, let's put it to the furthest point of the earth. And the other one said, is there actually one point people cannot find anything if they want to? And they got quite frustrated, as you can imagine. So the chief god suddenly said, you know what, guys? There's actually only one place we can hide that one thing. Can you imagine where it is? Inside someone's heart. So the message goes, only when that person is ready, that person will embark the journey on the inside. Think about that. So many people said, but what if you help somebody who isn't ready yet and detect something they shouldn't detect yet? I said, you can be absolutely calmed because that won't be possible. Like, I cannot help somebody who hasn't done the work, who hasn't reached that stage where they say, you know what? The more is really what I'm at. Because I can tell you the last 11 months have not been the most fun-filled for me.
Yeah.
Because it was all about getting rid of the BS I believed. And, declutter electronically, that was just the smallest thing, right? To unsubscribe of all the newsletters I had, of all the organizations I was with, basically getting to the point where I realized, you know what? There is not one single person on earth I am reliant on in regards to finding and living my path. But it's scary, I tell you. It's scary. Like some people said to me, how far did you go? I said, you know what? I've been actually thinking like, I started the email, I don't know, like 20 years ago. I don't know. And I wondered, how far can I actually delete all the emails without, thinking? So I said, okay, maybe I should leave the emails from my lawyer's conversation, which is like 2 years back. But then I literally took all the emails I had, deleted all my inboxes up to these 2 years. And my friend said, Markus, are you nuts? How can you? You know what was next? How can you delete your identity? And I said, how stupid is that?
Yeah.
How can my inbox be my identity? They said, Markus, I would freak out to delete my past. And I said, that's the only way to actually land in the present, to be
Yeah.
willing to let go of your past.
What?
So yeah, that was quite a daunting thing to press enter and delete so-called past.
That is refreshing to think about. There are moments where I'm like, there's 10,000 emails in my inbox. I'm not like the active deleter. And I just think the last few years, if I don't need it at this point, let's delete it. Let's delete it. I'm in on that game too. Now it takes time. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to do it. It's like a
And
waste of
if you
time trying to
talk with
delete
people
all.
who are very high on energy work, they will tell you that your inbox actually not only clutters your inbox, but it clutters your energetic flow.
Hmm. I
You
just
know,
created a new one. I'm like, you can have that. Go ahead. So that's
that's
where I
good.
just work from a good one now. It's like my junk mailbox. Like, all right, send it over there. Oh my goodness. Okay, so you had this incredible journey. When did it start shifting to the work that you're doing right now from your sales aspect of where you're at with that going into like executive assistant?
So literally, when I ask the questions, why am I here and why am I here? Because it actually started during the pandemic. So almost like everyone was hit by a depression around me. And it took me quite long until I actually was hit. So that's when I started asking, how can I actually still serve my clients if I am at that low point? And it probably was the first time that I was hit by imposter syndrome, to the point that I asked the universe, should I even post on LinkedIn anymore, for example? And the answer was yes. So I said, okay, so what should I post on? So give me 10 possibilities. And number 7 was imposter syndrome. So I thought, that's interesting. So I started posting imposter syndrome, did some research, and I received feedback from all around the world. And they were fascinated about the topic. However, 2 guys who were quite close to me came back with a feedback that puzzled me. They said, Markus, the symptoms I absolutely can relate to, not imposter syndrome itself. Then I thought, something is off. So maybe it's not the imposter syndrome that has to be taken care of. And then it dawned on me. The term imposter syndrome is the actual culprit. So think about it. If you go to a doctor and the doctor doesn't know anymore what to say, they basically create a syndrome. A syndrome is nothing else than many different symptoms they cannot, basically explain, put them all together, and now you have a syndrome. So these 2 female doctors, I believe they're very clever, and they definitely tried to do something good when they created and basically coined imposter syndrome. But if I call you or diagnose you with imposter syndrome, I can tell you, Steve, you're screwed. So what do you do about imposter syndrome? You suffer from imposter syndrome. Now you take on that title, that label, right? So how do you deal with it? You can't, because you suffer from imposter syndrome.
Right.
So this
right.
basically gives you being the right to refuse anything that will be challenging in your life.
Ooh.
So I show it to you practically. Put it this way. Here, people call it glass ceiling, right? So if you want to break through this glass ceiling, this is almost impossible. So what happens is people do not dare to break the glass ceiling because they're afraid of what happens next. So they basically settle for a level which is way lower than they actually be able to. And sooner or later, they call it as good as it gets.
Yeah.
So I show you something else. I've been sitting on I had a double swing chair, a huge one on my terrace in Switzerland. And I suddenly saw something. Here's a membrane. Here's space. Here's the atmosphere. Here's the sun. So I saw people going up with a little spaceship. And when they got close to the sun, they freaked out, had imposter syndrome, and returned to base. So of course they tried again, but guess what? Every single time, Tiff, they went less high. They aimed less high. And suddenly they reached a level where they felt comfortable. You know, the comfort zone? And they called it as good as it gets. Then I thought, what if imposter syndrome is actually a signal and we have it all wrong? That was my first mission. What if we have it all wrong? And then I suddenly understood, goodness me, probably 96% of all my clients in my entire career had suffered from imposter syndrome. So I pictured myself, in hindsight, as a pilot instructor who basically sat into their spaceship, and I gave them the permission and I've gave them the courage to just close their eyes and go higher than they would dare to. They basically crossed their fingers knowing, we're getting so close to the sun and we might burn and we will die. And I said, no, just stay. So they went through that membrane and suddenly everything was just peaceful and they were in space. And I said, you see, that's where freedom lies. So I suddenly realized, Steve, and this might be sounding a little bit confusing at first, but I realized imposter syndrome is a signal from the universe to tell you, keep going because you are on a worthwhile mission, and all it takes to trust the universe a little bit more than the fears that have been instilled in you by society.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to David Meltzer, and he was a mentor back then to me. And he once sat on a call. He said, Markus, I believe you not only have struck gold, but I believe you have identified the number one issue that kills the most careers, stifles the most personalities, kills the most potential in people, much more than money issues. And I thought, wow. And I think he is really right. Because think about how many dreams get killed because of imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
that became my mission. So I went on a call with some friends, and I tested out my philosophy, my idea. So what I've done before, absolutely unconsciously, having no bloody clue what I was doing, that I was even doing it, I started mapping out what I was doing. So I started working with some clients, and I said to them, look, let me actually deconstruct what I usually was doing blindly and go with you step by step. So they came to me and said, look, here's an issue where I'm struck by imposter syndrome. Therefore, I settle for as good as it gets, and I don't dare to go further. I said, why don't you dare to go further? Because I don't trust myself. So why wouldn't you trust yourself? Yeah, Markus, that's probably the $1 billion question. I said, yeah, I can give you an answer. Because the imposter syndrome is only a symptom. And the real problem, Tiff, is an authenticity struggle. So if I come from my scientific background, then I will call it authenticity struggle. And people would say, oh, that sounds really clever. Makes sense. But if I'm cheeky, I say, you know what? We simply have no bloody clue who we are. We have no bloody clue why we are who we are. So because we do not know, guess what, Tiff? We do not trust ourselves.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I say to them, okay, let's do the following. Sometimes people ask me now, is there a few things I can do right away to beat or nip this imposter syndrome in the bud? I said, yes, you can. So go back into your career, go back in your life, and look at something you successfully conquered, something you successfully achieved, and start dissecting what led me to that result. This is the deconstruction process, And when they actually realize, gosh, there is a method to the madness that led me accidentally to the result.
Right.
Makes
Accidentally.
sense, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm doing with my clients, especially the business people, I take like 3 or 5 successes they had and deconstruct them with them. So they suddenly realize, gosh, this has like 10 ingredients, this has like 5 ingredients, this has like 17 ingredients, and this one has like 25 ingredients. So I make them understand all the ingredients. So I say, look, it's almost like a homeopathic doctor. I had a dear friend in Switzerland. He was Pakistani. And he said, look, Markus, I have more than 100 components and I learned them. And now I can mix them at will. So imagine if you finally get to understand yourself, but it takes guts. I'm 53 years old. It takes guts to admit, despite of all my career, despite of all my accolades, despite of my age of 53 years, No, I don't have a bloody clue who I am. And the stuff I believe I am is probably something some other people told me about me. So the first
Mhm.
step to healing imposter syndrome is admitting I do not know who I am. Therefore, I do not trust this person. So why would I trust a pilot going beyond a point where humanity says it's not possible? You need to be super trained. You need to be an astronaut. You need to be a genius to go through this membrane, go into space where everything is possible. Like, how would you trust someone you do not know? So once people get to know themselves, guess what? Almost everything is possible.
Yeah.
And they know what can happen. Failure? What is failure? Failure is a congratulation by the universe saying, gosh, Tiff, you dared.
Uh,
And
yeah, I
believe
know.
me, even if you failed, you have actually succeeded.
And it's just a
Because that,
version that was different, right?
yes, because that bloody comfort zone has been stretched.
Yeah.
So that's
Um,
how it all started, debunking imposter syndrome. And yeah, that just led me to a plethora of invitations on podcasts because
oh, I
they just
love
said,
that.
look, it is so important for sales. It is important for business people, for business owners. It's important for managers because, there's this realize, gosh, this imposter syndrome thing is so prevalent in today's life that something has to be done about it. And since I debunk it and bring a solution for it, yeah, I do understand that's quite of interest.
My goodness. All right. This has been so fun. Let's do this. I only have a couple more questions left for you so that we can wrap up. Where at this point people are thinking, I want to talk to you. Where do you want people to come find you?
The easiest way is to connect on LinkedIn. Literally, send me a connection request, send me a message, and
Oh, I
let's
love it.
just talk.
And then this one's fun to ask. Why do you why do you keep trying? Why do you keep showing up to do what you do for people?
Simply because I know if people do not learn about stillness, they're lost. Because, today it's all about noise. It's about more. It's about higher. It's further, faster. But the answer is in stillness. And that's not yoga or meditation. I do both. And that's why I dare to say it. It's not that kind of stillness. Stillness is absolutely active, but it's the congruence between thought and heart, which then opens the path to your soul. Because, if we don't come back to stillness, I believe we're doomed as a society.
So
Because
yeah,
look
no.
around,
Right.
look around. It's like,
100%, 100%. Oh man. So this is amazing. I love all the stuff that you're saying. Let's do this. I'm going to ask the last question. What do you want to leave with everyone? What's your nuggets of wisdom that we'll end the show with?
so I'd love to leave the audience with the following. The real key is returning to the original design. And the original design, Tiff, basically means remember who you were before your world told you who you had to become. I'll have to repeat that.
Mhm.
Remember who you were before the world told you who you had to become.
Man,
Yeah. This is my mission and this is why I'm doing it.
love it so much. I've had such a good time with you. I know whenever I have
Likewise.
a chat
Thank
with
you.
you, I get to see you in a room for networking. I'm like, "Ah, yeah, you're here." Just the presence that you bring with all the people is wonderful. Guys, listen, I'm so grateful for everybody that stayed on this call to be able to hang out with such an awesome person. And Marcus, thank you for your time. I know it
It's
was
my
like
pleasure.
for us to try to get our schedules arranged to make this happen was like when something takes such an effort to make happen, I'm like, we need to hang out more than ever because it's like something's tearing us apart. We need to grow closer together. So I appreciate you and your time and being able to come here today.
Been my
And
pleasure. Thank you.
everybody go check out Marcus. You've got all of his links below for how you're going to go find him. And if you can't find him, just friend me and I'll get you right with him. So with that, thank you guys. I will see you on the next episode and I'll talk to you guys then. Bye.